Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Gregg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. I have brought one of my favorite people, Ron Magill, a walking encyclopedia of knowledge on wildlife in the animal kingdom. Ron, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the invitation to be on the podcast.
I love it. I love it. All right. I've got, the environment. We're both South Florida guys, first of all.
Yeah.
And I think did you go to Miami Palmetto High School?
Miami Palmetto Senior High, Color Ridge Middle School, University of Florida.
Nice. So I'm a Palmetto guy also. So I'm going to put it in, I'm going to rank it, most, biggest name from Palmetto. I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to go Jeff Bezos. Number 3, Gregg Goldfarb. Number 1, Ron Magill.
No, number 1, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
There you go.
Justice. That's number 1 right there.
How dare I? And as an attorney, that's almost embarrassing. And then Kevin Ferguson, right? The mixed media guy.
We got several astronauts. Palmetto has got a very deep line of blue blood, to say the least.
It's a lot of talent. And right now, the University of Miami football Hurricanes defensive tackle is also, I can't remember his name, but he's an excellent player. I think he's going to go to the NFL.
Palmetto's got a great football team this year. I mean, they're ranked in the top 10 in the state.
Let's cross our fingers. Now, I know there's going to be an alert today, a FEMA alert, so I'm going to turn my phone off before we get haywire with that, right? 2:22.
Do the same.
And today Animal Kingdom Day or something like that? October 4th?
It's World Animal Day. Yes, it's World Animal Day.
World Animal Day. That's wonderful. This is like a magical moment in my life. All right. So I want to sort of talk about, the 6th mass extinction.
Yep.
What it
the
is.
Anthropocene. They call it the Anthropocene.
Anthropocene. What it is, how that relates to zoos, what zoos try to, what the purpose of a zoo. I know for some people it's pretty basic. Others don't, they just go there to bring their kids and they don't really even know what it is.
I mean, I think zoos have evolved and changed quite a bit even in the last 30 years. I mean, I've been working here at this zoo now. I'm in my 44th year. So I've been working here pretty much all of my life. But zoos are no longer the simple attractions they used to be. And I can say, honestly, I didn't come to work here to work for an attraction. I came to work here to work for a conservation organization. Yeah. And that's basically what I try to do here. Zoos are no longer like this place where you just put an animal on exhibit and people come and see it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that needs to be dispelled right away is the fact that, generally speaking, almost all the animals you see in accredited zoos today, at least the overwhelming majority of them, are not animals that are taken out of the wild. Zoos do not take animals out of the wild anymore. These are all animals that are bred under human care, and we exchange them using a very, very, very strict breeding policy. We have programs called the SSP, which stands for a Species Survival Plan, which is, to put it in very layman's terms, it's kind of like computer dating for animals, where we're making sure we're pairing up the right animals to create the biggest gene pool, the healthiest animals. And the whole objective of the SSP is, to maintain a good, healthy population under human care, at least for the next 100 years, as an insurance policy against a very uncertain future in the wild. Having said all that, I want to tell you this. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need any zoos. And I would never, ever endorse or support taking an animal out of the wild strictly to put it on an exhibit in the zoo. The only way I would ever support that is if you're trying to save that individual animal's life, or you're trying to save the species that it represents. And zoos have done that. You talk about the California condor, the black-footed ferret, the Arabian oryx. These are all animals that would be extinct today were it not for zoos and their captive breeding programs. So that's a very important role that zoos must play, is to serve as that insurance policy, while, of course, providing windows to this world of wildlife. Listen, I was a kid who was born in a small apartment in New York City. My father was an immigrant from Cuba. My mother, the daughter of an immigrant from Colombia. The only access I had to live wild animals was going to the Bronx Zoo. Nice. And going there as a kid, it planted a seed in me that just grew into a huge tree of passion for wildlife. And it's why I do what I do today. So I understand the value of zoos providing those windows to people who will not get the opportunity to go to Africa to see an elephant in the Serengeti, or to the Galapagos to see a giant tortoise on the island, to the Arctic to see a polar bear, to the Antarctic to see a penguin. So these are very important windows that we have to touch people, to touch kids especially, to get them to care.
All right, so it's almost like the person can see the animal, like almost make contact, and they feel like they have some special relationship, and it generates a positive feeling from the young child, and perhaps in the future they're going to be an ambassador like yourself.
Absolutely. There's an old saying that says, in the end, we protect what we love what we understand, and we understand what we're taught. The role of zoos has to be also to teach people to understand animals and love them. You know, today I'm watching so many of these shows on television, and they're going down a very bad path, in the sense that they love to sensationalize animals. You know, when I was a kid, there was a show that I watched every Sunday night at 7:30. It was like going to church for me. It was called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Oh my God.
Marlon Perkins, Jim Fowler. Jim Fowler turned out to be one of my greatest mentors. I met him like 38 years ago, and he's the person who taught me how to work around animals, how to handle animals, how to respect animals, how to properly present them. That show inspired you to want to go out and learn more about wildlife, want to go out and explore the wild, explore nature. The shows I'm watching today, you know, when animals attack, the world's deadliest, you know, river monsters, they're all sensationalized shows that if I'm a kid watching this, I'm not going to want to go out and explore, because I'm afraid something's going to go out and kill me. It's the wrong message. It's the wrong message. We've got to teach people how to appreciate and respect wildlife, so they don't put themselves in a position to be afraid of it. And in doing so, make them want to go out and learn more about it, not just be afraid and stay locked in your house.
All right. So what is the zoo? How does a zoo help protect a species maybe that's going endangered? What's the game plan?
Well, the game plan is, first of all, we set up, like I said, a breeding program under human care that serves as an insurance policy against the very uncertain future in the wild. In the wild, you could have anything from wars to natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, fires that can wipe out a population of animals. So having these animals under human care as part of an insurance policy, and I don't want to mislead the public here. I don't want people to think, oh, zoos, you know, they're breeding animals, they're all put them back in the wild. Absolutely not true. That is by far the exception as opposed to the rule. Though there have been some animals that have been bred in captivity and successfully released to the wild. That is a very, very difficult process, and it's not something that zoos are doing on a regular basis. So anybody who tries to tell you that is not being totally honest with you.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's important that we have these animals. God forbid the need comes to where we have to raise them so they can live and survive in the wild. We can set up a plan to do that. But once an animal, you know, it's that old saying, once an animal becomes extinct, it's forever. All the money in the world isn't going to bring it back, and we have to be able to have that insurance policy. Zoos now have set up incredible genetic banks for wildlife, you know, frozen DNA samples and embryos of different types of frozen sperm of a wide variety of wildlife that are found in these huge sperm banks maintained by zoos, again, serving as an insurance policy. So zoos, they play a critical role in connecting people to the wild.
So let's just say I'm the parent, I've got a young kid, loves animals or whatever. Can I get my kid involved in the zoo, like as an intern, or is there any opportunity for me to is that an avenue for me to like get my child really fired up about it?
We have several internship programs here, depending on the age of the child. Starting at 15, we have a program here at the zoo called Conservation Teen Scientists, CTS kids. These are the greatest in my almost 44 years of working here. It's the greatest group of volunteers I've ever worked with at the zoo. These are all basically 15 and up, right up into first year of college, where these kids come out and they act as ambassadors for people who come to the zoo. They do different studies on the animals out here. They do, habitat studies. They help with designs of different things. They really are able to use their imagination, use their passion to contribute to the success of the zoo and connecting to the public that comes in here. So that to me is the number one best opportunity for any kid 15 and older to come to the zoo and work as a CTS volunteer.
I'm not going to let this opportunity pass. I know there's the Ron Magill Conservation Endowment. Talk about that. What's that all about?
I'll tell you what, for me, like I said before, I didn't come to work here to work for an attraction. And quite frankly, my goal in working at the zoo is always to help animals in the wild, because the bottom line is this: if the zoo is the last place you can see the animals that we have on exhibit here, then zoos have failed in what should be their number one priority, and that is to protect animals in the wild where they belong. Okay. I didn't think that we were doing enough years ago. I think we've gotten better recently, but we weren't doing enough years ago to actually provide money for conservation work in the field. We'd spend millions of dollars on new exhibits here and very little, if any, on protecting those animals in the wild. And that bothered me. So I said to myself, listen, you know what? I'm going to go out and raise money myself to create a conservation endowment. For those who aren't familiar with what an endowment is, it's basically raising a corpus of money that you don't touch. You invest that money, and then you take the proceeds from those investments, and you can use that to do whatever the focus of the endowment is. In my case, it's conservation. So I basically had a come to Jesus meeting with a previous director, and I said, I'm done. I'm not going to work here if it's going to be just, building fancy exhibits, big fancy cages. That's not what I signed up for. And I said, I'm going to go raise money. And they kind of said, well, go ahead. I think they said it with an attitude like, well, you're just a zookeeper. How are you going to raise money? And quite frankly, I didn't know how I was going to do it myself, but I was just so committed to doing something. Fortunately, as somewhat of a public figure that I've become over the 4 decades that I've worked here, I've been able to meet a lot of very successful and influential people. I told them the story. I told them how I had a dream of creating this endowment. And, within just a few years, I was able to raise, now that the endowment stands at close to $3 million, and it produces every year anywhere from $60,000 to $120,000 every year that goes just to help animals in the wild, to provide scholarships for students who have chosen a career in conservation. The bottom line is not a penny of that money can be spent at the zoo. It can only be spent on protecting animals in the wild where they belong, or supporting students who are studying to do the same thing.
Aside from the scholastic part of the endowment, what are some of the ways your endowment is actually helping protect the species? I mean, I hear about poachers and all that.
Sure. Well, for instance, I just recently purchased a brand new research vehicle in South Africa for them to study and observe cheetahs, and also act as rangers to protect cheetahs. So that was a brand new SUV that I purchased for them. I purchased another brand new SUV in Kenya to do the same thing. I do a lot of work in trying to conserve cheetahs. I've worked with them for many years. I bought a brand new van right here in South Florida, a brand new ambulance for the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, which is the facility that rescues and rehabilitates native wildlife that's hurt and injured for release back into the wild. They needed a new ambulance, and I came up with tens of thousands of dollars to buy them a new ambulance out of the endowment. I bought radio collars for jaguars in Brazil. The money is used in so many different ways, but it all has to be directly connected to protecting the animals in the wild.
And for those that actually want to donate to this endowment after the show, there's going to be show notes. So I'll have that all linked up for you to get to that and make sure you make that a reality. All right. So poachers, for many years, I'm like, oh man, how are you going to deal with all these poachers? And there's not enough money. But now I'm thinking like artificial intelligence and all these satellites. Is that a pie in the sky, or?
No, it's not. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, drones are now playing a huge role in, surveying different types of reserves, national parks, to ensure that poachers are not there. Instead of taking a guy out and putting him out on a Jeep and driving over a certain territory, they can take these drones that have heat sensing mechanisms on them and can sense out people in huge amounts of acreage. And they've been very successful in capturing a lot of poachers that way. There's all kinds of technology now being developed to help protect these animals in the wild.
Overall, do you think we've turned the corner on the poachers? I mean, I would imagine the governments have got to be all in on going after the poachers, and not, oh, it's my brother who's the poacher, I'm going to let him go take off a bunch of tusks or whatever.
I think we've certainly gone in the right direction. There's a huge way to go. The bottom line is this: it's supply and demand. As long as there's a supply and people are going to be paying exorbitant amounts of money for these products, people are still going to go out to try to get them. Money is, I don't want to say it's the root of all evil, but it certainly is the driving force in getting people. I've met poachers. I've met poachers in Africa, in South America, that have stopped poaching, now have become guides to help
Nice.
photo safaris and things like that, because no one can track animals better than they can. So they've been able to use their skills for something positive. But they all told me we never wanted to kill these animals. This was the only way we knew to put food in our families' mouths. And people need to understand that. It's very easy for us here, for instance, in the US, live in our air-conditioned homes. We have nice highways. Most of us drive cars and things like that, and say, oh, you shouldn't do this because these animals were there before you were. Well, you know what? You don't have these mouths to feed. You're not trying to feed your kids. I try to tell people all the time, if I dedicated my entire life to conservation, to wildlife. If I'm in the middle of the African bush with my wife and my children and they're starving, and the only way I know to feed them is to kill the last rhino on earth, the rhino's going to die. There's no animal that is going to live before my kids do. And I wouldn't expect that of anyone else. And no one else should expect that of these people who have to live in these areas with no economy, no way of feeding themselves and feeding their families. We have to provide them with alternatives. We have to give them support. These are not bad. I can tell you that most poachers are not bad people. It's the middlemen, it's the big guys, who are dealing out the money and moving these products that are the bad guys. They're taking advantage of people that are starving, that are looking for some way to get food in their families' mouths. These are not the bad people that people think they are.
Yeah. Now, are there countries out there that need to be exposed for not doing enough against the poachers?
I think, I'm not going to say there are countries, but there's probably certain, municipalities, small governments, small areas within countries that, corruption, gosh, man, I can't even begin to tell you how overwhelming corruption is, especially in third world countries. Some of the countries I've been in Africa and Central and South America, when I see how corruption, how bribery is used to get whatever they want, it's mind-blowing. I mean, we don't realize how lucky we have it here in the US, even though we've been seeing a few exceptions lately. But the bottom line is, we have a basic rule of law here that is not at all what the case may be in so many other countries. And, I tell people quite often, I say, I have a strong belief in education. I'm a proud University of Florida alumni, but there's no greater education than travel. When you travel around the world, when you meet people, other governments, other countries, you see how they run, you see how they do things. You develop a much greater appreciation for what we have right here.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to move on now to, the topic that really disturbs me probably more than just about anything, which is, I keep reading we're in the 6th mass extinction.
Right.
And we're losing how many species?
Well, the UN came out with a study, a nonpartisan study a few years back, that said if we can continue on the trajectory that we are on right now, in the next 50 years, we're going to lose 1 million species of animals. Now, that's almost an incomprehensible number when you think about it. 50 years, 1 million species go extinct. That could be a breaking point in total ecosystems and total environments. People, there are people who live in an apartment in the middle of the city and they think why should they worry about, the tigers in India, the gorillas in Africa, whatever they never see them. They're just worried about their city. But let me tell you something, we are all connected. And I try to tell people all the time, whether it's the insects, the bats, the butterflies that pollinate the plants, that provide us with the food that we eat. And keep in mind, 1 out of every 3 bites of food that you put in your mouth is directly connected to a pollinator. Okay. Yeah. So whether it's the pollinators, whether it's the coral reefs that protect our coastlines and provide, rookeries for fish to breed and reproduce, whether it's the rainforest that, provide oxygen to breathe and the medicines that we use, all of these things are directly connected to our quality of life. We may never see them firsthand, but they're directly connected to our quality of life, because the planet, and I don't want to come off as some extremist, because I think extremism in any form is dangerous. I love wildlife. I'm a conservationist. And having said that, if there's a roach in my house, I step on it. It's dead. Okay. So I don't want to come off as one of these, no, I'm not that. But I want people to understand that the planet does not recognize political boundaries. It is all connected. All this wildlife is connected. By protecting these things that provide us with this quality of life, we are in effect protecting ourselves. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand, that we have to be able to protect these things, to protect our quality of life. There's another old saying, I'm full of old sayings, but there's one that says, we've not inherited this earth from our parents. we're borrowing it from our children. And we've got a moral obligation to protect what we have here, to keep it as good or better than when we came on board to see it. I think my generation is responsible for being stewards of this planet, and we got to do a better job.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about the sixth mass extinction. I'm going to sort of lawyer you a little bit, but I just want to point out one thing. Cockroaches, yes, I do step on them, kill them or whatever, and, kind of pretend like it never happened. But the palmetto bug, then I get them on a little plate and I bring them back outside and let that, because in my, the high school thing, the palmetto, I know that was kind of silly, but when I was a little kid, I'm like, hey, I can't kill the palmetto bug. But okay, so sixth mass extinction, says who? Like, when did the sixth mass extinction begin? Who decided that we're in the sixth mass extinction? Is it just a phrase? Is it?
No, it's not. It's not a phrase. It's scientists, biologists, zoologists that have been documenting the rate of extinction, and the rate of extinction that is happening now is the greatest since the extinction of the dinosaurs. That rate is the greatest, and is believed now to excel in many ways since the rate of the dinosaurs. And there's something I want to make people understand. Extinction is a natural process, okay? Extinction is not a bad word. It's a natural process. Extinction occurred way before man ever walked the earth. What's the problem now is that this extinction is so accelerated due to what man is doing that it's unnatural. It's not a natural extinction. It's causing things to occur in an unnatural way at an unnaturally very rapid rate. And that is putting a stress on the planet that at the end of the day, could cost humans a lot, to say the least.
So when you're saying 1 million species are going to be gone by 2050, you said?
In 50 years. So let's say 2070.
Okay, so how many species do we know of that exist now?
I couldn't give you a number. It's millions. It's millions for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And, as an attorney, the one thing that I'm always looking for a solution, Endangered Species Act.
Yep.
It's on the books. There's a lot of effort. There's a lot of lawsuits that are filed. The species are listed, delisted. Give me your take on the Endangered Species Act. Is it working? How could it be improved? I know that's only the United States. Do other countries have their own Endangered Species Acts?
Yes, they do. I mean, CITES, the Convention for International Trade of Endangered Species, is the global governing agency. So an animal is listed as CITES 1, for instance, that is an critically endangered species, and any country dealing in CITES 1 animals as a global, covenant are subject to arrest, prosecution. But the Endangered Species Act of the United States, yes, it is working. It does work. We've protected a lot of lands. We've protected a lot of animals that way. Having said that, we don't have enough resources to really enforce it the way it needs to be enforced. There's such a black market in this country for, endangered species products, whether it be feathers, whether it be bones, whether it be teeth, all kinds of things. So, until we are able to really provide the law enforcement agencies with the financial backing they need to staff themselves to be able to enforce these laws, it's always going to be a little easier to break them. And that's the problem I have. The law, as it's written on the books, is a great law. It does great things, but it needs teeth.
Yeah. So, the teeth component of this issue, it sounds almost like the same thing as the poaching issue. That you've got the same, it's just nobody's calling it poaching, I guess, right?
No, it's not, but it is poaching. It is poaching when you're taking an animal product that is protected by law. That's poaching. So yes, in effect, that's what people are doing when they're trafficking in these endangered species parts. They're poachers.
What was the fifth mass extinction?
The dinosaurs.
Oh, that was the dinosaurs, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So that was a long time ago. I mean,
yes, well, a long time ago in our perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
And the planet's been around for billions of years.
Yeah.
So it's just a little sliver of time in the overall when the planet developed, so to speak.
Okay, so before we did our show here today, I did some research. I wanted to know, pretend like I knew what I was talking about, and so I found a recent study on same-sex species.
Right.
And so, what's that all about? And
you talking about parthenogenesis?
What, talking about the
a fish that can actually change sexes and be a male to begin with and a female to second.
No. The study that I'm seeing is the one that's showing that this almost like homosexual behavior in the animal.
Homosexuality is found throughout the animal kingdom. This is not news. It might be a study that fine tunes it a little bit more, but homosexuality is found throughout the animal kingdom. It's been documented for many, many years. I don't know what the study is trying to say other than that it is a behavior that is found in multiple species. It's not something that, some purist will try to make you believe it's a human, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, deviant behavior. It's a natural behavior found in multiple species throughout the animal kingdom.
Yeah, that's very interesting as far as I'm concerned. I think that says a lot about, some of the theories out there.
Absolutely, it does.
All right, so I want to end the show on positive stories. Okay.
Right.
Pandas, snow leopards, are there some species that are actually increasing in population? Maybe some endangered species?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no more iconic animal than the panda, and the panda was taken off the endangered species list, and now it's just, its status is just threatened. And that's a huge improvement. It's showing that these conservation efforts are working for them. Same thing with the snow leopard. Okay. This is an animal that, again, was considered like a ghost cat because it was hardly ever seen. But now with studies, they're realizing its numbers are coming up. And we're seeing that with several other animals also. Now, sometimes those population increases aren't necessarily a good thing because they can overwhelm other species. The balance is what's so important. Balance is really important. But there are some critically endangered species that have made a comeback. When you talk about the black-footed ferret, like I said, this was an animal that bred in zoos. We are now working in zoos, breeding them in captivity, releasing them back into the wild, working in collaboration with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to work with these animals. There are jaguars now that have been seen in Arizona coming up from Mexico. So, this is something that I think is, it shows hope. I mean, one of my greatest heroes of all time, Sir David Attenborough, says you can never lose hope. And he always tries to use that optimism to say, we're working towards making things better. And there are examples of where it has worked. We got to keep building on those examples.
Yeah. The polar bear. Ice, we're losing ice. Is there any hope?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is just my theory. Polar bears are not going to become extinct in my view. Global warming is certainly going to have an effect on their behaviors. I think what you're going to start seeing is you're going to start seeing polar bears coming to shore and start feeding on things other than seals. They'll start feeding on caribou. They'll start feeding on some of the land mammals that are found in the coastal areas of Alaska and the Arctic range and where they're found. And then I think you're going to find these polar bears start hybridizing with big brown bears. They're going to start breeding brown bears. You're going to have hybrid. You're going to lose the pure species that was the polar bear to a hybridized species that basically evolved out of necessity for survival. I don't think the polar bear is just going to disappear. I think it's going to morph into almost a subspecies that is going to adapt to this, this climate change that's created the lack of ice that it doesn't enable it to get out to get the food it needs as soon as it needs to.
All right, I want you to give the audience the best two things that we should do. We're regular people. We love animals. Of course, we're all in support of everything that you're saying. What's the two things that we can do that will have the most impact?
Listen, there's an old saying that says, think globally, act locally. Recycle things, compost when you can, conserve water, conserve energy. If you can, go to hybrid autos, electric autos. I know there's a lot of controversy with the battery situation, but still the bottom line, it's better than fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have got to be reduced because they're making such a huge detrimental impact on the planet.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think that will happen. All right, last question. I don't want you to be optimistic, Ron. I don't want you to be hopeful, Ron. I want you to tell me, you've had 40 years, maybe even more, going to the Bronx. Hey, when I grew up, the Bronx, it was the Yankees.
Absolutely.
Now that I've gotten a little bit more sophisticated and, listening to you with Stu Gatz and Dan Lebitard, I've learned a lot. All right. Now on the Sabado Gigante, I didn't learn too much. I don't know, but I can't believe that you were on Sabado Gigante.
27 years, brother.
Great show. I just loved it. But all right. we're back to realistic Ron.
Yes.
Are things overall, are you positive or are you negative about the overall state of affairs? Wildlife, the animal kingdom, us, the planets?
I'll tell you what, I am positive for one major reason. Our youth. This young generation is so much more focused on the environment, on doing the right thing than my generation ever was.
Yeah.
You know, I drove the biggest, baddest hot rod in town. That thing got like -7 miles to the gallon. I was cool back then. You drive a car like that now, you're going to get dirty looks.
Yeah.
Okay. I never heard of recycling. I see these kids that start their own environmental clubs. Kids on the weekends do their own beach cleanups. Things that I never thought. I mean, when I was on the weekend, I was going to the beach, but not to clean it up. You know, to look for girls. I mean, that was the whole thing. It was a whole different story. The mentality of our youth has changed. I'm not a huge fan of social media. I think in general, it could be the toilet bowl of the internet, but these kids have learned to use social media to garner support and to work towards their causes. You know, they believe in that saying that says, when the people lead, the leaders will follow, and they start their own movements to create this wave of protection, of conservation. And that's what gives me such optimism.
All right, wonderful. All right, that'll do it for this episode. I mean, unless you is there anything else you want to tell us? Anything?
No, man, I appreciate the opportunity. And again, I'm profoundly appreciative of this young generation. These kids inspire me more every day.
All right, I love it. I love it. You made me feel good. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. I'm going to drop all of Ron's information about, well, it's not the Miami Zoo anymore. Now it's the Miami-Dade Zoological.
Just call it Zoo Miami. Zoo Miami is what they call it.
Zoo Miami. That's a lot easier because nobody pronounces zoological.
That's all governmental stuff. Zoo Miami.
All right, folks, that'll do it.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.